Welcome to my music theory and reading music course. You can read every lesson in this series at your ease at pianotheoryexercises.com, where you will also find interactive exercises to practice what you've learned. Below this video you will find links to those lessons and exercises on the website. Also below this video you will find a link where you can download this whole music theory course as a free ebook, so don't miss this opportunity. And if my lessons helped you, please don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks a lot! Lesson 13 of the music theory series is about diminished chords. Now, before I start, I just want to say that if you're a beginner, you're just starting with music theory, then perhaps it's better to skip this lesson now and to go on with lesson 14. So you can ask yourself, why did you put this lesson in this series when you can skip it? Well, I did it because of reasons of completeness. Because in a lot of popular music you see diminished chords. Perhaps not that often as major and minor chords, but you still see them. So again, if you're a beginner and you're just starting with music theory, you can skip it for now and come back later when you're a little bit more advanced in music theory, and for now go on to lesson 14. But of course, if you want to know more about diminished chords, then continue with this video, because I will explain exactly how diminished chords are formed. I will start with diminished triads, and after that I will look at seventh chords. Those seventh chords, I will split them again in two. I will look at seventh chord where you add to a diminished triad a minor seventh, and at seventh chords where you add to a diminished triad a diminished seventh. We will not look at adding major seventh. Now, perhaps you don't know what a diminished seventh is. To know exactly what a diminished seventh is, you can look in the article about intervals on pianotheoryexercises.com. I will put a link down this video. But for this lesson you only have to know that a diminished seventh is a half tone lower than a minor seventh. But let me start with diminished triads, where we still don't need a seventh. And diminished triads have, like minor triads, a minor third. So what's the difference between a diminished triad and a minor triad? Well, that's the fifth. Let's start in the key of C. You know that the C minor triad consists of the notes C, E flat and G. C being the root, E flat being the minor third and G being the fifth. The difference with a diminished triad is in the fifth. A diminished triad doesn't have a fifth, but a diminished fifth. Now, what is a diminished fifth? A diminished fifth is a fifth that is lowered by a half tone. So in the key of C, G is the fifth, G flat is the diminished fifth. So the C diminished triad is C, E flat, G flat, root, minor third, diminished fifth. Now, perhaps you would say, hey, wait a minute, this interval is a tritone, so why not call this note the tritone? Well, first of all, we don't call a note a tritone, we use the word tritone only for the interval. But on the other hand, tritone is more an alternative name for diminished fifth. And since a triad consists always of the root, third and fifth, we rather speak of this note as the fifth, in this case the diminished fifth. So again, C diminished consists of the root C, the minor third E flat and the diminished fifth G flat. Let me look at some other diminished triads. For example, the A diminished triad. I start on A, go to the minor third, which, as you know, is C. The fifth would be the E. Now I have an A minor triad. When I lower the fifth by a half tone to the diminished fifth, to the E flat, I have the A diminished triad. A, C, E flat, root, minor third, diminished fifth. Other example, the E flat diminished triad. I can start with an E flat minor triad, E flat, G flat, B flat, and then I lower the fifth, the B flat, with a half tone to this note. This is the diminished fifth. Now, this looks as an A, but we don't call it A in this case. Why not, would you say? It's a white key, so why not call it A? Well, it's a fifth. A diminished fifth in this case, but it's still a fifth. A fifth means that you need the fifth letter from the root being E flat. E flat has the letter E. Now the fifth letter after E is 1, F2, G3, A4, B is 5. So that means it has to be something with a B. Now how is that possible? This note, which is an A, being something with a B. Well, as I said, it's a fifth, a diminished fifth. So it needs a note name with a B. Well, that's only possible if we call this a B double flat. So E flat, G flat, B double flat is the E flat diminished triad. You can also say this is the fifth. A diminished fifth is a half tone lower than a fifth. Since the fifth is a B flat, we only add an extra flat to B double flat. So E flat, G flat, B double flat. How do we notate diminished triads? Well, let me show you in the case of C. You notate it as a C with a little circle, or as a C with the letters D-I-M from diminished. So that's about triads. What about seventh chords? Well, as I said, you can either add the minor seventh or the diminished seventh. When we add a minor seventh, you get the so-called half diminished chord. When you add the diminished seventh, you get the diminished seventh chord, also very often shortly called diminished chord. Now, the half diminished chord is used a lot in jazz, but not so very much in popular music. So I will start with the diminished chord, or also called diminished seventh chord. So, to a diminished triad, we will add a diminished seventh. Now, as I told before in the beginning of this video, a diminished seventh is a half tone lower than a minor seventh. Let us start in the key of C. As you know, the C diminished triad consists of the notes C, E flat, G flat. A minor seventh would be the B flat. A half tone lower is a B double flat. For the same reason as with the E flat diminished triad, this is not an A, but a B double flat. B being the seventh note in the key of C. So a diminished seventh is something with 7, so has to contain the letter B. So that's B double flat. C, E flat, G flat, B double flat is the C diminished seventh chord, where B double flat is the diminished seventh. Now, to be honest, very often you see this called the A instead of B double flat. But, of course, officially it's a B double flat and not an A. Let me show you some other diminished chords. For example, the A diminished seventh chord. The A diminished triad is A, C, E flat, which we saw before. The minor seventh in the key of A is G. When we lower it by a half tone, we arrive at G flat, being the diminished seventh. So A, C, E flat, G flat is the A diminished seventh chord. Another example, E flat diminished. First the E flat diminished triad, E flat, G flat, B double flat. We add a diminished seventh. First the minor seventh is of course one whole tone below the root, so that's D flat. We add an extra flat, we lower it by a half tone, and this is D double flat. Watch out, it's not a C, it's a D double flat. So, E flat, G flat, B double flat, D double flat is the E flat diminished seventh chord. The notation for diminished seventh chord, and I will do it for the C, is almost the same as for diminished triads. You only add a 7. Now you can look at diminished chords in another way than saying, okay, it's the root, minor third, diminished fifth and diminished seventh. You can also say, when you look at the C diminished chord, look at this interval. This is a minor third. Look at this interval. It's also a minor third. And look at this interval. It's also a minor third. So we have 3 stacked minor third intervals. So a diminished seventh chord consists of 3 stacked minor third intervals. In this way you can easily find other diminished seventh chords. Let me say, for example, G diminished seventh. From G, a minor third up, to B flat, from B flat a minor third up to D flat, and from D flat a minor third up to, and this has to be an F flat. Why? Because the seventh in the key of G is something with the letter F. And major seventh was F sharp, minor seventh just F. So the diminished seventh has also to be something with the letter F. So F flat. G, B flat, D flat, F flat is the G diminished seventh chord. Now, if all this looks complicated, I have a good message for you. Because there are only 3 different diminished chords. Now you say, what? How is this possible? We have 12 different notes, so there should be 12 different diminished seventh chords. Well, have a look. Remember, this is the C diminished seventh chord. This is the E flat diminished seventh chord. But look, they contain exactly the same notes. Going back to the C diminished seventh chord, if I take the C an octave up, I get the E flat diminished seventh chord. So the E flat diminished seventh chord is an inversion of the C diminished seventh chord. Let's have a look at the A diminished seventh chord. Hey, that's also the same notes. How can you see that? Well, take the A an octave up, and we have the C diminished seventh chord. So, A diminished seventh, C diminished seventh, and E flat diminished seventh are exactly the same chords. They're just other inversions. But it means that this chord, you can not only use it for A diminished seventh, but also for C diminished seventh or E flat diminished seventh. And this chord, you cannot only use for C diminished seventh, but also for A diminished seventh and E flat diminished seventh, etc. There's even one more diminished chord that uses exactly the same notes. And that's G flat or F sharp diminished. You see, they're exactly the same notes as C diminished, E flat diminished. This is F sharp or G flat diminished. This is A diminished. So the same set of notes can be used for 4 different diminished chords. So 4 different root notes. Exactly the same notes. Now, since we have 12 different notes, for each group of 4 different root notes, we always have the same set of notes. So that makes a total of 12 divided by 4 is 3 different diminished chords. Now, I put all this together in the following table, and you could see this as 3 different families of diminished chords. The first family is the family that we just have seen, so the chords A diminished seventh, C diminished seventh, E flat diminished seventh, and F sharp diminished seventh. And below you see the 2 other families. Now, 2 remarks. First of all, instead of B double flat, I just put A because it's simpler, and also for all the other double flats. Second, if you're looking, for example, for D sharp diminished, you will not find it in the table. But it's very simple, just look at E flat diminished, because E flat is the enharmonic equivalent of D sharp. And this is, of course, the same for all the other enharmonic equivalent notes. Let's go to half diminished chords. As I've told you before, a half diminished chord consists of a diminished triad with a minor seventh. So in the case of C, the C diminished triad is, as we know, C, E flat, G flat, and the minor seventh is simply B flat. So this is C half diminished. And it consists of the root, minor third, diminished fifth, and minor seventh. Let me go to the A half diminished chord. First, the A diminished triad. And we add the minor seventh. 1 whole tone below the root is the G. So A, C, E flat, G is the A half diminished chord. One more example, the E flat half diminished chord. First the E flat diminished triad, E flat, G flat, B double flat, and we add the minor seventh with it, which is D flat, to obtain E flat half diminished. Now above the keyboard you see now the notation, in this case for C, so you can use either the symbol on the left or you can use C M7 flat 5. Now, to be honest, the second notation, C M7 flat 5, explains much more how this chord is formed. Because M stands for minor, the minor third. 7 stands for the seventh, in this case the minor seventh. And flat 5, well, yes, it means that the fifth is flattened, so the diminished fifth. Okay, all this should enable you to find all the other half diminished chords yourself. Notice that there are 12 different half diminished chords, not 3, as was the case with diminished seventh chords. And here it is, the table with all the half diminished chords. Now I can imagine that this is a whole lot of information, but you can easily read all this information at your ease on pianotheoryexercises.com. You will find a link under this video.